All right, ready to rumble?
Let's go, champ.
See what I did there?
You couldn't resist, could you?
Nope. Today, we're diving deep into the world of boxing, and specifically, the man who made that phrase iconic, Shannon Briggs.
The Let's Go Champ guy himself.
You guys sent us his Wikipedia page, and let's just say there's a lot more to this guy than meets the eye.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about a guy who went from homelessness to heavyweight champion with a whole lot of drama in between.
This isn't just a boxing story. It's a story about resilience, reinvention, and carving your own path in a sport that can be brutally unforgiving.
And let's be real, that Let's Go Champ thing.
Yeah.
Pure marketing genius.
But to understand why it worked, we need to go back to the beginning, back to where it all started for Briggs. We're talking about Brownsville, Brooklyn, one of the toughest neighborhoods in New York City.
This is where the foundation of Shannon Briggs, the boxer and the showman, was laid. Imagine a young kid facing homelessness, navigating the streets where every day is a fight just to survive.
Not exactly the glamorous image that comes to mind when you think world champion boxer.
Right. But that's the thing about Briggs' story. It's a study in contrasts. Here you have this kid dealing with poverty, even battling childhood asthma, and then at 12 years old, he has this chance encounter that changes the trajectory of his life.
Okay, I gotta know. Who does a 12-year-old Shannon Briggs bump into on the streets of Brownsville that makes him think, boxing, that's my ticket out?
It was fate,
Yeah.
pure and simple.
Yeah.
That 12-year-old kid came face to face with none other than Mike Tyson.
No way.
Yes way. A young Tyson, mind you, still on his own path to becoming an icon, but already radiating that aura of power and intensity.
Wow. I can only imagine what went through young Briggs's mind at that moment. Meeting your idol, especially someone like Tyson, it has to light a fire in you.
And it did. 3 years later, Briggs walks into the legendary Start City Boxing Club, the same gym where Tyson trained. Talk about destiny. It's like their paths were always meant to converge.
Okay, so he's training at Tyson's old gym. But you said this deep dive is about more than just boxing, it's about resilience. How does that toughness he learned on the streets of Brownsville translate into his boxing style?
You can see it in his relentless pursuit of victory, his ability to take a punch and keep coming back for more. That, my friend, is pure Brownsville grit.
And that grit starts to show itself pretty early on. We're talking about a stellar amateur career. Golden Gloves champion, dominating the New York boxing scene, even becoming the U.S. national champion. But then there's this weird twist in his story. The 1991 Pan American Games, he wins silver, which sounds impressive, but...
But it's not quite the underdog story you might expect. He enters the finals on buys. Essentially, other fighters dropped out, which means he walked into the finals without throwing a single punch.
So, talk about a lucky break.
You could say that. Though he then faces Felix Savon, a Cuban boxing legend. He was his first real test, and he lost. Not your typical path to the pros.
So he's got this mix of good fortune and a reality check all at once. But even then, people saw something special in him. He even sparred with a pro boxer, Phil Jackson, while he was still an amateur. That's unheard of, isn't it?
It's practically unheard of. And to add another layer to this, his advisor at the time was Mike Marley, a well-known boxing writer.
Wow, so he had some real insiders in his corner.
Exactly. So not only was he sparring with pros, but he was getting an education, the business of boxing, from someone who knew the game inside and out.
He turns pro in '92. 25 fights, 25 wins, undefeated. He's on fire. Did anyone think this guy could be stopped at this point?
He was a force to be reckoned with. But boxing is a humbling sport. In 1996, he suffers his first professional loss against Darrell Wilson, a third-round knockout, broadcast on HBO for the world to see.
I bet that loss stung, especially after such a dominant start to his pro career.
It did. It was a reality check, a reminder that even the most promising fighters are vulnerable. But, and here's the crucial part, it didn't break him. Instead, it set the stage for one of the most pivotal and controversial fights of his career.
Okay, I'm hooked. Set the scene. Who's he facing? What's at stake?
Picture this. 1997, Atlantic City, New Jersey. Shannon Briggs steps into the ring to face the legendary George Foreman. At stake, the lineal heavyweight championship of the world.
The lineal championship. Now, some of our listeners might not be familiar with that term. Break it down for us. What makes this different from any other championship belt?
The lineal championship is about legacy. It's the purest form of boxing lineage, a direct line of succession from one great champion to the next, dating back to the very origins of the sport.
So it's not just about holding a belt, it's about being part of boxing history.
Exactly. And in that moment, facing George Foreman, a man who embodied boxing history, Shannon Briggs had a chance to etch his name into the lineage of greats.
Talk about pressure. Stepping into the ring with a legend like George Foreman, a guy who's basically a walking, talking boxing history book. What was Briggs' strategy going into a fight like that?
Well, Foreman was known for his punching power. Even in the later stages of his career, Briggs knew he couldn't trade blows with him toe-to-toe.
I mean, who could?
Right. So he opted for a strategy that would become a point of contention. He retreated, he clinched, he did whatever he could to survive Foreman's onslaught.
And that's what sparked all the controversy, right? People questioning his heart, calling him out for not being aggressive enough.
Exactly. Some boxing purists saw it as running away from a fight, but others, they saw a calculated risk. Briggs endured a brutal fight, took some heavy hits, but he made it to the final bell. And when the judges' scorecards were read,
He pulled off the upset.
a majority decision in favor of Shannon Briggs. He became the lineal heavyweight champion of the world, a title that had been held by boxing royalty.
A controversial win for sure, but a win nonetheless. But winning a fight like that, it's almost like a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because now the target on his back is even bigger.
You're absolutely right. And that win set the stage for his next challenge, a showdown with Lennox Lewis, the WBC heavyweight champion. This was a clash of styles, a true battle for boxing supremacy.
I'm sensing a but coming.
But the Lewis fight didn't quite go the way Briggs had hoped. Lewis was a master technician, a brilliant boxer with a powerful jab and incredible ring IQ. He controlled the fight from the opening bell.
So how did Briggs handle that? He couldn't exactly employ the same strategy he used against Foreman.
He couldn't. And unfortunately for Briggs, he couldn't find an answer for Lewis's dominance. He got knocked down multiple times, and in the fifth round, the referee called a stop to the fight, a technical knockout, or TKO, in favor of Lennox Lewis.
Wait, back up for a second. For those of us who don't spend every Saturday night glued to boxing matches, what exactly is a technical knockout?
Good point. A technical knockout is basically when the referee, or sometimes the ringside doctor, decides that the fighter is too injured to continue, or if they don't think the fighter can intelligently defend themselves. It's not a knockout in the traditional sense, but it's still a decisive victory.
Gotcha. So not the outcome Briggs was hoping for, but I imagine facing a legend like Lennox Lewis, even in defeat, had to teach him a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And here's a fascinating tidbit. Years later, Lennox Lewis himself admitted that of all the opponents he faced, Shannon Briggs had the fastest hands and the most raw power.
Whoa. Even in defeat, Briggs made an impression. That says a lot about his abilities, even if he couldn't pull off the win.
Exactly. But talent alone isn't always enough in boxing. It's a sport of peaks and valleys of rebuilding and redemption. And after the Lewis fight, Briggs faced a crossroads in his career. He needed to prove he could bounce back from a high-profile loss.
So what's the next chapter in the Shannon Briggs saga?
The next chapter is a testament to his resilience, his ability to adapt and evolve. He takes a step back from the world championship scene and embarks on what you might call a rebuilding phase.
Okay, so he's back in the gym, working his way back up the ranks.
More than that, he goes on an absolute tear, racking up win after win, knockout after knockout. From 1998 to 2006, he's practically unstoppable. 17 wins, all by knockout, against a mix of veterans and up-and-comers. He even adds some notable names to his resume, like Ray Mercer and Brian Scott.
He's sending a message with every win. Don't count me out.
Exactly. He's proving he's still a force to be reckoned with. And this resurgence culminates in a shot at the WBO heavyweight title in 2006 against Sergey Liakovich. Now, Liakovich was a tough, durable fighter, a southpaw with some tricks up his sleeve.
This one had Fight of the Year potential written all over it.
And it delivered. It was a back-and-forth brawl, a true test of wills. Briggs was trailing on points going into the final round. He needed a knockout to win.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat here. What happened?
Picture this. It's at the 12th round, the clock is ticking down, and Briggs is behind on the scorecards. The crowd is going wild, sensing a decision victory for Liakovich. But then, out of nowhere, Briggs unleashes a furious combination. He connects with a massive right hand that sends Liakovich crashing to the canvas.
He did it. He pulled off the knockout in the final round. That's the stuff of movie.
It was unbelievable. Liakovich gets back to his feet, but he's clearly dazed. Briggs smells blood in the water. He unloads another barrage of punches, and this time Liakovich is out cold. He falls to the ropes completely out of the ring.
He knocked him out of the ring. You can't script that kind of drama.
You can't make this stuff up. Shannon Briggs, against all odds in the final round, reclaims his spot at the top of the boxing world.
Talk about a comeback story. He goes from a devastating loss to Lennox Lewis to knocking a guy out of the ring to become champion again. This guy's career is a roller coaster.
And like any good roller coaster, there are more twists and turns to come.
This is why I love boxing. It's full of surprises. You think you know what's going to happen next, and then bam, Shannon Briggs knocks a guy clear out of the ring.
And just when you think Briggs is back on top of the world, another twist comes along.
Okay, lay it on me.
Remember how I said every roller coaster has its ups and downs? Well, this high didn't last long. Briggs defends his title against Sultan Ibragimov.
This is the 2007 fight, right?
Exactly. And it wasn't pretty. Briggs came in at the heaviest he'd ever been. And he just couldn't match Ibragimov's speed and agility. He lost by unanimous decision, surrendering his WBO title.
After a knockout like that last one, this must have been a tough pill to swallow.
It was a crushing defeat, no doubt about it. And it led to a decision that shocked the boxing world. Shannon Briggs announced his retirement.
Retired. Just like that. He always seemed like a fighter who would go out on his own terms.
It did seem like the end of an era. But then again, we're talking about Shannon Briggs, a man who thrives on defying expectations.
Because he doesn't stay retired for long, does he?
Not even close. Less than 2 years later, he's back in the ring. He scores a first-round knockout against Marcus McGee, reminding everyone that he still packs a punch. But then there's another twist.
Oh, come on. What now?
Briggs tested positive for a banned substance. His team claimed it was medication for his asthma, but the win was overturned, and he faced another suspension.
This is like a Greek tragedy unfolding in the boxing ring. Triumph followed by setback over and over again.
It's the story of Shannon Briggs in a nutshell. But even with the controversies, even with the setbacks, he never gave up on his dream. He serves his suspension and comes back with 3 more first-round knockouts in 2010.
Okay, now I'm starting to think this guy has some kind of superhuman ability to bounce back. Most fighters would have called it quits after all that.
He had this uncanny ability to absorb punishment, to dust himself off and come back swinging. But this comeback leads to a fight that, even looking back, is tough to discuss.
Oh, man. You're talking about the Vitaly Klitschko fight, aren't you? Thunderstorm.
That's the one. Klitschko was a beast, a dominant champion known for his size, power, and technical skills. Briggs entered the ring as a massive underdog, and the fight itself, it was brutal.
I remember watching it. It was painful to see him take that kind of beating.
Klitschko dominated the fight, landing punch after punch. Briggs was incredibly tough, but he was outmatched. He lost by unanimous decision. But the real story was the physical toll it took on him.
He was hospitalized after that fight, wasn't he?
He was. Broken nose, torn bicep, multiple other injuries. It was a stark reminder of the risks these fighters take every time they step into the ring.
You'd think that would be the end of the road for any boxer. After a career of ups and downs, injuries, suspensions, you name it. Most people would hang up the gloves and call it a day.
And many thought he would. But this is where Briggs' story takes a fascinating turn. He steps away from the world championship picture, but he doesn't disappear. Instead, he reinvents himself.
How do you reinvent yourself after a career like that?
He becomes Shannon Briggs, the personality, the entertainer, the marketing genius. He sets his sights on Vladimir Klitschko, Vitaly's brother, and the other dominant champion at the time. And he launches this hilarious, almost surreal campaign to get Vladimir's attention.
Wait, you're talking about the beach harassment videos, right? Those were legendary.
Briggs would show up wherever Vladimir was training, chasing him on the beach on a paddleboard, even jumping into the ocean fully clothed just to get a reaction.
He knew exactly what he was doing, creating a spectacle, keeping his name in the headlines.
He understood the importance of self-promotion, of staying relevant in a sport obsessed with what's new and what's next. He even turned his attention to David Hayes, another British heavyweight champion, staging these elaborate confrontations and call-outs.
He was like a one-man hype machine. And you gotta admit, it was entertaining as hell.
He kept people talking, which is half the battle in boxing.
Yeah.
But eventually the fight opportunities dried up. He had a few more bouts, but a failed drug test in 2016 led to another suspension, and it seemed like the final curtain was falling on his career.
It was a sad way for it to end, honestly, after all those comebacks, all that heart he showed throughout his career.
It's the brutal reality of boxing. But even though his boxing career ended on a sour note, Briggs wasn't finished reinventing himself. He dabbled in acting landing roles in Hollywood films alongside Will Smith and Jason Statham.
No way. From the boxing ring to the big screen. That's quite a transition.
And he became a successful entrepreneur in the cannabis industry, proving that his hustle extended beyond the ring. And just to come full circle, he even became a boxing trainer, most notably working with Logan Paul, a YouTube star who made the jump to professional boxing.
Wow. Talk about an unpredictable career path. From homeless kid to world champion to internet sensation to Hollywood actor to, well, you get the idea.
Shannon Briggs' story is a testament to the power of resilience, reinvention, and sheer force of will. He was a fighter, a showman, and ultimately a survivor.
So after this deep dive, after going beyond the headlines and the viral moments, what's the lasting impression of Shannon Briggs?
He was a walking contradiction, a whirlwind of talent and controversy. He could be frustrating to watch at times, but you could never accuse him of lacking heart. He poured his everything into boxing, and he left an undeniable mark on the sport.
He might not have the same legendary status as some of his opponents, but there's no denying his impact. He was a force of nature both in and out of the ring. And that's why his story resonates even all these years later.
And that's what makes him so fascinating. It's a reminder that sometimes the most compelling stories are the ones that defy easy categorization. Shannon Briggs was one of a kind, and the world of boxing is a little less colorful without him.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this thought. What's the bigger takeaway from Shannon Briggs' journey? Is it about the importance of self-belief, the resilience of the human spirit, or maybe even the power of reinvention in a world obsessed with what's new and what's next? Think about it.